Hello and welcome to Newswire. I'm Ayza Omar. United Nations Secretary General is in Pakistan on a two-day visit to attend an international conference, a conference that's been titled 40 Years of Afghan Refugees' Presence in Pakistan, a New Partnership for Solidarity. Now, this conference is taking place in Islamabad. Now, as the title suggests, it's been 4 decades since Pakistan has been hosting and facilitating waves of incoming Afghan refugees, hundreds of thousands of which have settled here. An entire generation was born in Pakistan, despite the highly fluctuating international funding coming in through UNHCR. To just get a snapshot into how Pakistan has hosted millions of Afghan refugees over these 40 years, let's take a look at this report.
Just before the Soviet invasion, Pakistan received its first wave of Afghan refugees. Reportedly, 1 million people crossed the border back in 1979. At its peak, Pakistan hosted some 4.5 million refugees. Today, the immigrants have been living in Pakistan for the past 40 years. It is the second largest refugee hosting country, with the largest protracted refugee population in the world. At the time when the first wave of refugees came in the 80s, Pakistan's economy was already suffering from high inflation and unemployment. A further influx of people increased the pressure on Pakistan's economy. In Antonio Guterres' maiden trip as UN chief to Pakistan, he lauded Pakistan's efforts to host these millions.
Pakistan continues to play a crucial role in realizing this potentially historic opportunity for peace.
Unlike other host countries like Iran, Pakistan did not restrict the settlement of Afghan refugees. The majority today reside in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, with a significant number living and working in Karachi. After 2005, the government of Pakistan issued POR cards to Afghan refugees in Pakistan, an exercise that resulted in the registration of 2.153 million Afghans in the country's national population database. Pakistan's government provides free formal and informal education to registered Afghan refugees until the age of 16. Higher education scholarships are available in fields like medicine, engineering, agriculture to 3,000 Afghan students in Pakistan. The immigrants are mostly engaged in daily wage labor, agricultural activities, and transportation. A significant number also entered the business community by setting up small and large-scale businesses, mainly in the clothing, carpet weaving, heavy machinery, and the gemstone industry. However, those unemployed and unable to obtain upward economic mobility are dependent on government funding and subsidies. In 2013, the Minister of States and Frontier Regions commented that in the last 30 years, Pakistan has spent more than $200 billion on Afghan refugees and did not have the capacity to continue doing so. It has been a struggle to repatriate the refugees. Many don't want to go back because of the conflict in Afghanistan. Part of the demand for funding comes from voluntary repatriation of Afghan refugees. Families are given cash to help them travel back and resettle in Afghanistan. From 2002 till 2018, nearly 4.4 million Afghans have been successfully repatriated. However, the Afghan refugee situation has experienced fluctuations in international funding in response to donor fatigue. Currently, Pakistan needs almost $35 million in funding to host and help repatriate Afghan refugees. Only 21% of that funding has been received so far.
So you just saw some of the key features of what has unfolded in these past 4 decades when it comes to the government of Pakistan facilitating millions who had, from the beginning, from the 80s, been coming in waves to Pakistan to seek refuge. Now, we're essentially going to be talking about not just the plight of the Afghan refugee in Pakistan, but also what future does repatriation have for this Afghan refugee? Where do international donors stand in terms of funding, and of course also the kind of support that is needed to return them back home? So without further ado, let me introduce our guest. We're speaking to Mr. Pamir, an analyst and former advisor to UK and Afghan governments. He's joining us today from Dubai. We also have with us Mr. Imtiaz Gull, an analyst, and he's also reported extensively on Islamist groups in Afghanistan and Pakistan since the late 80s. He's joining us today from Islamabad. Welcome to both of you. Mr. Pamir Patang, I want to begin this conversation here with you. We talked briefly about the kind of facilities available to Afghan refugees. Now, of course, there has been a generation of them who have been born in Pakistan, who've lived here, many of whom have assimilated into society really well. But of course, there have been approximately 4 million who have returned since 2002 to Afghanistan. Tell us a little about your view on what repatriation to the Afghan refugee looks like today.
Well, we've been talking about the repatriation of the rest of the refugees settled in Pakistan for the last almost 15 years. Of course, the whole issue of the repatriation or at times forcing the refugees to be returned back to Afghanistan was both political and as well as the issues that Pakistan is also facing. Some have returned. There is no doubt that quite a big number of Afghans have returned to Afghanistan since the beginning of Karzai's administration in 2002. And most of them have reintegrated back into the society in Afghanistan as well as have taken quite high positions, both within the private sector as well as the government sector. But of course, we should not forget that Pakistan is subject to the 1949 Geneva Convention, where to give protection to the refugees from wherever they come, whether it's the Afghans or from other places. It does make life difficult for those who have been born in Pakistan, for the last 4 decades. Requesting them to return back to Afghanistan sometimes could be difficult as well, because some may not have a place where to reside, some may not have families, and those who have lived for the last 3 to 4 decades in Pakistan, they must have been reintegrated into the Pakistani lifestyle, and requesting them now to go to Afghanistan is seen in Kabul as a political move. Of course, this is all linked to the peace and reintegration settlement that can take place between the Taliban and the US as well as the Afghan government. One of the conditions I've heard was that once the peace deal is signed between the US and the Taliban, would be to have the prisoners released of the Taliban, and for Pakistan to implement the full the peace agreement across its territory would be to have the return of the refugees back to Afghanistan as well. I'm not sure whether the Afghan government itself is ready to have hundreds of thousands of refugees in its territory right now. Of course, we're going to be having a period of spring, so it shouldn't be really a problem in terms of the weather. But can the government handle it? I'm not sure.
But Mr. Patang, the concern also is largely we've learned from, especially this conference with all the leading dignitaries talking about this, is the pull factor here. You talk about the springtime in terms of weather conditions being favorable, but there's also concern that ceasefire might not just be emulated the way it is being prescribed. The spring offensive is when the Taliban restart their attacks, and they haven't ceased even while we talk about how close they are to a deal.
I agree. The concern that our security forces would be now we are reaching an agreement. An agreement is reached in principle between the sides. And the security forces on the ground, the security sector of Afghanistan would have concerns that the number of these refugees that will return to Afghanistan, how many of them are genuine refugees and how many of them are, and what number of them would be insurgents or those who have been having the cover or could have the cover of refugees and returning back to Afghanistan. So it's quite a big challenge. And if it does happen, I think there should be phases of refugees to return.
All right. Mr. Pamir Patang, thank you for joining us. Coming to you, Mr. Imtiaz, extensive studies have been done on Afghan refugees in Pakistan and the kind of businesses that they're involved in, the kind of revenue that they are generating, whether it's in the carpet industry or especially in KP, where majority of them are involved in carpet weaving, whether it's in gemstones, in cloth, in transportation. There's a huge revenue coming from them. But the problem really is because they're not registered, the documentation is an issue. We can't bring them into the formal economic sort of numbers. We can't show that how beneficial they are to the economy. Is that a correct interpretation in your opinion?
And you know, every country encourages business, welcomes business.
Okay.
Look at the European countries.
Right.
Whenever people are coming in with huge sums of money, they don't ask for the source of money.
No, I get what you're saying there, Mr. Gull. There's a gap there in terms of the bureaucracy maybe could have done better in terms of recording, registering, but without losing track of that conversation, let me introduce our correspondent, Indus News correspondent, Essa Naqvi, who's reported extensively from refugee camps in Pakistan. Welcome to Newswire, Essa. Tell us, give us an idea about all the different places in Pakistan where these refugee camps are present, the kind of upward mobility you see there, and what the sentiments generally are of the Afghan refugee who was born in these camps in Pakistan.
Well, Ayza, majority of the Afghan refugees, they are obviously in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province and Balochistan, but they are scattered all across Pakistan, the length and breadth of Pakistan. If you visit any city, you would find presence of, if not more, some Afghan refugees. And it's not the same set of people who migrated or who came to Pakistan initially to seek refuge. There have been some who have returned. Like if we talk about the figures since 2002, there are about 4.4 million Afghan refugees who have gone back. But in the same time, more people have come, and there have been cases that some of the refugees, some families who took the UNHCR and government of Pakistan's package for repatriation to Afghanistan, they went to Afghanistan, somehow they couldn't settle there and they have come back. Then there is a set of people, like about 1 million, who have born in Pakistan, and they have, as Imtiaz has mentioned, they have integrated into Pakistani society. They are working in the nearby markets, they are offering services in different sectors. Like it's not just KP and Balochistan. When I say, I'm talking about the federal capital. Thousands of Afghan refugees, they live here, although it's not an ideal living. But still, when I visited those camps, I discussed their issues and the way they think about Pakistan extensively, and there is a very positive sentiment, and majority of them, especially the ones who have born in Pakistan, they do not wish to go back because they do not relate to Afghanistan. They have friends here, they have lived here, they have whatever they have studied here, whatever skill they have adopted is what they got from Pakistan. I want to take I want you to take a look at one of the reports that I did, in which I discussed the issue or the way how the Afghan refugees that think about Pakistan, about being in Pakistan. Take a look at that, and then we can continue the discussion.
The son of Afghans who fled the war in their country and took shelter in Pakistan. Shawali was born in a refugee camp near Islamabad. This small settlement just outside the city houses about 5,000 Afghan refugees. Wali says he will not leave Pakistan, even if he is given an option to return to what many would call his home country.
I work in a close-by vegetable market. I have no wish to go to Afghanistan as I was born here. We thank Pakistan for allowing us to live here. I have Pakistani friends here, and if asked to go back to Afghanistan, then I have offered my friends to go there with me.
Wali is not alone. Pakistan's hospitality has won over many like him who now call this country their home.
My mother and father came here. I have never been to Afghanistan. All I know is that there is war in Afghanistan, but here we live in peace. I cannot go to Afghanistan.
Experts say the influx of Afghan refugees to a struggling economy like Pakistan has always had socio-economic repercussions. Pakistan's generosity has not been fully acknowledged by the international community. On her visit to Pakistan last year, former UNGA President Maria Fernanda Espinosa called for compensating Islamabad for housing millions of Afghan refugees. But the pledge has yet not been translated into action.
So as you saw the sentiment on ground, this is just one example. I'm talking about Islamabad. Same is the case with the people living in Balochistan, in KP, in Punjab, somewhere in Sindh, Karachi. You go anywhere, you find similar sentiment. So practically the ones, and then there is obviously an issue that you have also mentioned, the documentation, even the data available with the UNHCR and the government of Pakistan states that there are about 1.38 registered Afghan refugees in Pakistan. Then they say that there is an equal
hold on to that thought. Tell me this. You closed your report there talking about international acknowledgement. With the conference today, what is your observation? What is the word on the street when it comes to the acknowledgement in terms of actual funding coming through for these refugees in Pakistan?
Well, Ayza, there has had a socio-economic impact on Pakistan. It's not just the economy, but also on the social side. There have been obviously an increased crime rate because of this crisis. But now let me focus on the economic side of that. Pakistan has suffered a lot because of that, and there has been very little acknowledgement and help from the international community when it comes to the refugee crisis. Same were the words. I was attending United Nations Secretary General's press conference and events yesterday, Antonio Guterres, and he is a person who has also served as High Commissioner for Refugees between 2005 and 2015. So this issue is also close to his heart, and he understands that. And he admitted that Pakistan got very little support from the international community and partner countries, and even the UNHCR cannot itself obviously take the burden of about 4 million Afghan refugees who have lived in Pakistan for the past 4 decades. There is a realization, but little help from the international community when it comes to dealing with this crisis. And Pakistan has obviously generously taken that burden on its shoulders. Pakistan is a struggling economy, but if not the help, but at least there is realization. Even last year when the United Nations General Assembly's President Maria Fernanda Espinosa, when she came to Pakistan, she said that Islamabad should be compensated for housing millions of Afghan refugees, but we do not see any practical actions to that effect.
Essa, Naqvi, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your update from Islamabad. Now, just here, the talk about not getting the kind of international aid that is needed, just to give you an idea, UNHCR has allocated around $35 million for Afghan refugees in Pakistan. So far, only 21% of that funding has come through. Now, just to give you an idea on the hospitality that was offered to these Afghan refugees, I'm going to refer to this quick soundbite of Sania Nishtar, who is the Special Assistant and Advisor to the Prime Minister on Afghan refugees. Let's take a listen to what she talks about how the government operated with the refugees in the 90s.
Understand very clearly, country which had its own political and operational problems with a severe financial crunch, we opened our primary healthcare services, our hospitals, to every Afghan entering the border.
Mr. Imtiaz, over here, we've seen that over the years, but there has been incredible effort. I mean, there have been millions that have been offered in scholarships by the government. I mean, yes, the bank account thing is rather recent, but there are Afghan students who are studying in medicine, in agriculture, in engineering. These are designated scholarships given to these. So it seems like whenever it is convenient for political bigwigs to use the Afghan refugee as a scapegoat, they're maligned. I mean, we've got to be fair on that front.
Yeah, they are maligned. And again, because I've been involved in this track too for the past 4 or 5 years, I've reported on Afghanistan for over 2 decades. I think, again, I would say there are every year 1,000 people, Afghan students are coming here, benefiting from the scholarships that Pakistan government has offered. And just 3 days ago, we had a dialogue with the Afghans, and we heard, which was something welcome. He said that Pakistan, one of the participants said, Pakistan is the only country which provides scholarships to Afghan students in engineering and in medical sciences. So that was something very welcome to hear. I think we have done a lot. However, we have failed to market that, project that, and that's why it becomes easier for a number of Afghans to take advantage of that and play it out negatively in the international media.
So, no, one of the main reasons how this repatriation and the facilitation of Afghan refugees can be successful. One of the main reasons why it's been held up is essentially the pull factor also. Something that was extensively discussed in the international conference today. For that, bringing us up to speed is Sumaira Khan, our correspondent in Islamabad. Sumaira, thanks for joining us here on Newswire. You've been attending the conference. We've heard the acting minister for Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan, Mr. Haroon Shah Mansouri. He talked about this in the conference, saying that Afghanistan wants Pakistan to be partners in the peace process. Shed some light for us on this. Historically, what is the significance of these comments?
Thanks, Ayza. Haroon Shah Mansouri and earlier, it was a second vice president of Afghanistan, the Sarwar Danish was also there. And the comments of these two, I think since morning I was covering the event, these two personalities, they have rendered such remarks that the afterwards proceedings of the summit were affected to a greater extent. And you could see that the comment from the second vice president of Afghanistan as well, where Prime Minister so spontaneously he replied to that, and afterwards when Haroon Shah Mansouri also talked about it. But there was a kind of environment in this international summit that was probably I would not take name of that UNHCR official as well, who talked to me later about that. It was not liked and it was not celebrated at all. And the official was of the view. Once again, it's of the he, on the condition of anonymity, he said that this was the summit, this was the opportunity for Afghans as well to take advantage of that to a greater extent, and this was not a forum to drag everyone in the blame game thing. And that was the word which was not liked by Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi as well, and he responded to that right now it's time to move on, and we have no choice but to work together, and we have to work together for the greater peace and the restoration of stability in Afghanistan, which is in the greater interest of Afghan people who are suffering right now.
Right, I'm glad you brought that up, because it was Mr. Shah Mansouri's statement that let's not resort to blaming, which is that the Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi didn't take very lightly there. But moving on, Mr. Zalmay Khalilzad was there, the US envoy who has been leading these peace talks with the Taliban. What did he have to say about the high hopes that all dignitaries have expressed in this conference when it comes to that pull factor that is achieving peace in Afghanistan?
Oh yes, he basically wanted to stress both sides to sit together and move on from this blame game thing. And I think he was not also quite pleased and quite happy with the remarks being rendered by the Afghan side. And what he had to talk about in the presence of UN Secretary General, that this forum should be taken as the greater opportunity for the betterment of Afghan people and for the betterment of, above all, for the betterment and prosperity of Afghan refugees who are obviously the word languishing would not be a better word for that, but obviously they are far from home. And indirectly he wanted to say that yes, they are living here in the capacity of refugees, but they can't live here forever. Although Pakistan has left no stone unturned in catering all these millions of Afghan refugees for over 40 years, but now it's time to get them properly settled in their own country. Because it can't happen, and it can't go away for forever that Afghans are living in Pakistan, and back in Afghanistan we are talking about rebuilding another nation for Afghanis. So the point he made was that even why America is taking all these headaches of getting into peace talks, that yes, American troops want to leave Afghanistan, but with a proper absorbing formula to get settled these Afghan refugees. And for the peace initiative, obviously there is no hidden agenda of US government.
No, he did mention, Mr. Khalilzad, categorically that the US didn't need permission from anyone to withdraw. And if that was the case, why would they be involved in the peace process? He did try in his efforts to give legitimacy to this peace process that everyone is anticipating the result of. But very quickly, Sumaira, about Filippo Grandi, the UNHCR representative chief, in fact, he talked about specifically that Afghanistan, Iran and Pakistan, all three countries were on a very interesting track in their own ways working with the Afghan refugees. Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, he talked about all three countries, but when that was an interesting part where United Nations Secretary General interfered, and he said that Pakistan is one country who has suffered a lot and who has to face a lot of music. I'm obviously rephrasing it, but he has said that, and he lauded Pakistan to a greater level, and you can see its aftermath as well on social media from Indian side as well, that why UN Secretary General is trying to appreciate Pakistan, and he is going all the way along to appreciate Pakistan in its effort to settle down all these Afghan refugees in Pakistan. So he was there and he said that Pakistan has done a lot, Pakistan has rendered a lot. So now this is the time to appreciate Pakistan efforts, acknowledge its efforts, that yes, despite having crunches of economy, right after comments made by Sania Nishtar as well, who was there, he said that yes, this should be lauded at all levels, and that is why Pakistan is making its inroads in everything, and for the peace. And he linked Afghanistan's peace stability with the role of Pakistan, pivotal role being played by Pakistan. That yes, if Pakistan is there, then the presence, the Afghan side should take advantage of Pakistan's pivotal role in in the whole scenario and in the whole peace and stability process. So Filippo, although make this little remark over there, even after in the question and answer session as well. There's that when I ask a question about the economic crisis and
Ms.
why the donors are
Sumaira Khan, I'm
showing
sorry,
their
we're going to have to cut you short there. Thank you for joining us. Sumaira Khan joining us, Indus News correspondent from Islamabad. The UN Secretary General talked about yesterday in his meeting with Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Let's take a listen what he said.
That the preferred durable solution for refugees has always been voluntary repatriation in safety and dignity to their country of origin. And this is also true for Afghan refugees. Through its support to the ongoing peace efforts and building the necessary regional consensus, Pakistan continues to play a crucial role in realizing this potentially historic opportunity for peace. And the United Nations remains committed to supporting an inclusive and Afghan-led peace process that upholds the human rights of all citizens and leads to a sustainable peace in Afghanistan.
The United Nations might be committed to supporting it and recognizing Pakistan's role here, but it is still very important that donor countries help out more exclusively to the Afghan refugees, because it's not just the peace deal that needs to be accomplished, but also the repercussions of society that has only seen war for 18 years. That has to be built in order to be that determining pull factor for these refugees. Well, we've run out of time there. Mr. Imtiaz Gull, thank you so much for lending your voice and your opinion on what is unfolding here in this international conference as it comes to a close soon. With that, we'll take a quick short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Newswire with me, Ayza Omar. We're talking about UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres' visit to Pakistan to attend this international conference, talking about 40 years of Afghan refugees that Pakistan has hosted. Now, also part of this conversation that has been making headlines has been also climate change and more specifically the Kashmir issue. Now, India has come out with its response to what Antonio Guterres had earlier said while meeting with the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, on Sunday, saying that the UN offices were always open for mediation on the Kashmir conflict, something that India today has responded by saying there's absolutely no role or scope of third-party mediation when it comes to Kashmir. So we'll be talking a little more about this, especially in terms of the UN Secretary General, talking about the UN Military Observer Group for India and Pakistan to be present on the ground, that there are massive human rights violations taking place in Indian-occupied Kashmir, and a lot more with our guests. So let me introduce who we're speaking today. We have with us Lieutenant General Ghulam Mustafa, an analyst joining us from Lahore, and we also have Dr. Farhan Chak, a Kashmiri, joining us from Doha. Welcome to both of you to Newswire. Beginning with you, Lieutenant General, how do you see the Secretary General's statement? Very strong words he's used on Sunday, recognizing not only the Kashmir issue, the humanitarian violations taking place on the hands of the Indian government, but also offering to mediate.
I mean, that is fine. We expected that from the Secretary General, because This is probably the oldest issue on UN's agenda, which has not been solved so far, and resulting into massive human rights violation. A lot of Kashmiris have offered their lives, their blood, even to the extent of being dishonored, molested. But India isn't ready to budge. This is for the world to realize that while Pakistan is always open to dialogue, always open to a mediation, always open to a third party coming in to support both countries reach an agreement on the issue, India has always been reticent. In fact, they have been going out and very arrogantly refusing this kind of a response from India. I consider this as a slap on the face of the international community, because if a UN resolution says something, then India has to respect that. And that can only happen if the world body now recognizes the issue and that start pressurizing India into coming on the negotiating table. And the third party, UN Secretary General would be probably the best man to be there to talk to both parties and knock some sense into Indians' head. Because what is happening now is because of Kashmir, because of the way the Kashmiris have responded to this Indian move and the way they are resisting everything that India can throw at them, it has now traveled to across India as well. Let not breath. If you see the response to what Modi did last was this new bill on the Citizen Amendment Act, whatever they passed it. The result is a massive kind of a response against this. But this actually is all adding up. And if it's not halted right now, probably this madness could lead to very major consequences for this region.
Dr. Chak, your thoughts on this, especially considering Mr. Guterres had specifically said when meeting with the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, discussing Pakistan-India relations in the Kashmir issue, he specifically said in so many words that there was a need and that the UN's position on it was still there, that the Security Council's resolutions should be implemented on the Kashmir issue.
You're absolutely right, Ayza. This has been an absolute diplomatic win for Pakistan. The UN Secretary General has clearly come out and recognized the legitimacy of the internationalization of this conflict. He has repeated mediation efforts, and it seems to me very quite clearly that Pakistan's Foreign Service, Pakistan's diplomatic corps, has successfully won him over. He is completely on the side of what is amount to justice for the Kashmiri people. And he's recognizing the role that the United Nations should play. And in many ways, by doing that, he's actually ostracizing India, and particularly India's kind of very aggressive and very nonchalant attitude towards the crimes it's committing. As a matter of fact, right now we're looking at the nightmare scenario in India's perspective. Everything that they've done and been doing has been repeatedly backfiring on them. They are absolutely on the back foot, and this is taken as a win. I think the efforts of His Excellency Munir Akram to make this come about, and of course our Foreign Service with His Excellency Shah Mahmood Qureshi Sahib, all of them together, this has been a great achievement for Pakistan and for
diplomatic win for Pakistan and Kashmir. But Lieutenant General, is it really, should we be that quick in saying that this has been a win in sort of, I would say, sensitizing the public, the world leadership, especially when the UN chief comes out and says this? But here, let's not forget how India responded today, and they talked about that not only does the UN does not have any role or scope. I mean, is India backing itself in a corner here? Because just today we also got reports of the US President Donald Trump imposing a ban of some $200+ million fine on India.
I think the offensive undertaken by Pakistan, starting with our Prime Minister's speech last year in the UN, this probably is a milestone that Pakistan should consider actually going to the world with whatever has happened right now. The UN Secretary General, the top diplomat in the world, says something, and that must have a weightage, and that must be respected internationally. And that is what Pakistan can capitalize on. But this should not be, this should not be let off. This pressure that is now being built on India. India actually has found itself out. Now it is in trouble. The trouble in two kinds, within and from outside, because what India is doing is trying to become partners to a major power shift in the region. And that is backfiring for India, because becoming part of that coalition, or what do you call, a kind of unwritten alliance, international level, that is actually not helping India, because the entire region, starting from China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, nobody wants American presence here in any way, and they don't want this region to become the battleground for the power games of the world. So therefore, India actually is in trouble. And if they don't realize this, and if the international community does not give the due weightage to the words of its top diplomat, then I think we are heading into kind of a chaos which is going to engulf the world. Because if this is what is allowed to continue and is allowed to pass, then this international body has no place in the world.
That's a really key point you mentioned there. Dr. Chak, I want to bring this conversation to you also. If the UN chief's words and his attempts to de-escalate a region, especially like Kashmir, where he has categorically talked about and advocated the UN military presence there to de-escalate the region, the installment of all those resolutions that the UNSC has proposed, if that gets ignored, what's ahead for India?
Well, big trouble days are ahead for India, and they're just really walking around with blindfolds on, unwilling to kind of concede that this is the way it's happened. But this is the modus operandi of the Hindutva government. They are whimsical and delusional. And I don't say this in any other but a scholarly and academic way. The delusion that they have fed themselves with for so long, as if to close their eyes and to imagine that no problem exists. But the world has woken up to the reality that there is a problem. We need to keep the pressure on, as the Lieutenant General was saying. We need to make sure that we highlight specific cases like the arrest and the imprisonment of the Kashmir Bar Association, Mia Qayyum Sahib. He's in prison. He's had a heart attack. He's not getting medical treatment. We need to highlight these specific instances that kind of reflect and continue to reflect what India is doing at all legal and formal channels that we can. And this, again, I think I take it as that Pakistan has a win in this, but we shouldn't, suffer from any type of sense that this is the end-all, be-all. Nonetheless, keep the pressure up and highlight these specific cases to the UN of what India is specifically doing. And also mention they still have not uplifted the communications blockade, irrespective of what they say. Absolutely. The communication blockade is ongoing in very many ways, and that should be highlighted as well.
Right, and as well as the fact, what is this communication blockade achieving? It was said by the BJP-led government that it was done for the benefit and the safety of the Kashmiris. For all we know, there have been thousands more who have been detained and have vanished off the grid because they're detained off in different provinces of India, not just in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Well, we've unfortunately run out of time. It was a good discussion. Dr. Farhan, Chak, Lieutenant General Ghulam, Mustafa, thank you so much for joining us. For Newswire viewers, we'll see you again tomorrow with a new episode. More news and analysis coming your way. Till then, goodbye.